We live in an era of remakes and remasters, but one remake that people seem to love is the original Resident Evil remake that came out on the GameCube. Now, me personally, I wasn't that into Resident Evil at the time. Tank controls and those games did kind of scare me, just wasn't my thing. Now that I'm running through all the Resident Evil games, I decided to go back to Resident Evil Remake after playing the original Resident Evil 1. Well, at least the DualShock edition. I remember not liking Resident Evil Remake that well, as I didn't care for the new mechanics that they added and new story beats. But now that I've beaten Remake, how do I feel about it now? Before we go deeper into this review, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the hype button. I'm showing you where the hype button is on the screen right now. I'm very grateful for everyone stopping by, as you can watch anyone in the world, but you decided to click on this video, so I'm very grateful and appreciative. I'm grateful for all the success that Jehovah God has brought my channel, and I pray that you all have a blessed day. Now let's get back into the review. Let's get the simple parts out of the way. Resident Evil Remake, for the most part, is basically just Resident Evil 1 again. The immediate difference are the graphics. Now, this is where I might get killed a bit in the comments, but I actually sort of prefer the original game's visuals. Objectively speaking, Resident Evil Remake looks better. It has better high quality graphics than the original game that released on the PS1, but I just think that this game is too dark. Now, to be fair, I'm playing the PS4 version of Resident Evil 1 Remake, which did increase the contrast a bit. So it could just be that this version of the game doesn't look that great. But overall, Resident Evil Remake was meant to be a darker and creepier looking game. And with that change in the visuals, we also got changes in the story, which I'm also not against, but I just prefer the original over this one. The original game's story was sort of cheesy, but it worked for the time. It almost had like a Scooby-Doo-like element to it. The members of STARS came off more chipper in the original game, and I think that contrast with the game actually just being scary for the time actually blended well together. Now the whole game is just attempting to be horror-based, and it doesn't really work because Resident Evil isn't all that scary to begin with. So personally, it comes more across as dry than it does scary. The characters no longer have the quips they used to have. When Barry gives Jill the lockpick, he doesn't call her the Master Unlocking, which is just cheesy and probably a bad translation. Barry also no longer says that Jill was going to turn into a Jill sandwich. Instead, he just says she's going to turn into a sandwich, which again lacks the charm of the original. There are other interactions that aren't as good. Chris and Rebecca's relationship felt more like a big brother, little sister relationship. In the original game, they didn't know each other that well until the events of the Spencer Mansion, but through this event, they got to grow and know each other, and I felt that was delivered better in the original game than the remake. In the remake, it just felt like Chris was just doing his duty as a member of STARS and protecting another one of his teammates. But in the original, it felt more like Chris was trying to actually build with Rebecca on a human level. I can't say the story overall is bad, as it's mostly the same. It's just these little details that I felt were better in the original than they are in the remake. There are also little details in the remake story that are kind of cool. For example, you could save Richard this time around and he actually ends up dying later, but it's still nice that you could see him for a little bit while longer. You could see Kenny's footage of him being attacked by the zombie. Capcom actually took the time to make 2 different shots depending upon the side of the table that Jill approaches Barry when he's looking at the blood on the floor. You would think it's unnecessary, and it kind of is ultimately, but it's things like this that show that the developers actually care about what the player is experiencing. The biggest change to Resident Evil 1 Remake story is the addition of Lisa Trevors and her family. This character is beloved so much, and I thought that this character has such a big importance to Resident Evil 1 Remake, and it's so shocking how much she just doesn't matter. It really does feel like this character is just added to the story. Don't get me wrong, I think the story is tragic, and I do like the character, but I think people oversold her. People do like her so much that I wouldn't be surprised if Lisa Trevors shows up in Resident Evil 9. Since we're going back to Raccoon City, she might just end up popping up because I think she can't technically die in these games, so we'll see. Either way, her addition to the story just doesn't add or subtract anything. She's a cool new character and kind of serves as Resident Evil 1's stalker character, but she really doesn't do much of anything. She's not scary either. She's very slow. She doesn't really do much damage, and unless you're just afraid of seeing her, you can easily get around her by just walking by. Since we're already here, we might as well go over the gameplay as a whole. Like I said before, this is still just Resident Evil 1, so most of the game is going to be familiar ground. I beat the original Resident Evil 1 pretty recently, and I was actually shocked to know that I couldn't just easily breeze through this game. They added a couple of new areas to the mansion and changed the way in which Jill and Chris maneuver around the mansion due to the new mechanics in the gameplay. This isn't necessarily a pro or a con, but Jill's campaign is actually not as unique as it once was in the original game. In the original game, Jill got the lockpick and she could easily just breeze through all the doors. In Remake, they removed a lot of the doors that Jill could just easily open with her lockpick, requiring a key now. And this game also has less drawers that you could just open, which makes the lockpick even more useless in this game. And most of the extra keys that Chris finds are for unlocking doors you need to go through versus opening drawers that gave you extra ammo. Jill's campaign was considered the easiest in the original game, but now I think it's about the same between Chris and Jill. I can't say either or is easier than the other. But that's only in exploring the mansion. Jill still can't take as much damage as Chris does, so she's still technically harder to me. That's mostly due to how zombies behave in Resident Evil Remake. New to Remake are the Crimson Heads. What these are zombies that reanimate after you kill them. Some zombies in the mansion are already dead when you get there, and even they could turn into Crimson Heads. One of my favorite parts of Resident Evil 1 was the strategy in taking out zombies. You actually had a lot of resources in Resident Evil 1, even though you may have not known that when you were first playing the game. It's wise in Resident Evil to pick the hallways you know you will frequently travel through and just take out all the zombies. Now in Remake, you have to do the same thing, but now there are extra steps in your way. If you take a limb off a zombie, it will not revive as a Crimson Head, but if that doesn't happen, you have to burn them. And you can only burn 2 zombies at a time before you need to get more oil. Now this idea of having to burn the zombies and the Crimson Heads isn't a bad one. I actually like it, but there's one fatal flaw to this system that would have made this so much better if they would have just implemented this the correct way. There's a secret to burning zombies. If you happen to lay 2 zombies on top of each other, you can actually take out more than 1 zombie at a time. Now when I found this out, I thought that this was genius until I realized that this is an inconsistent mechanic. It's so inconsistent that I can't even say for sure if this is a glitch or a bug that they kept in, which is highly unlikely. Most developers don't do that. But if it was, I wouldn't be surprised because it's really hard to get this to trigger. Zombies have to basically be perfectly on top of each other, and it seems that the torsos have to be touching, but I've read reports that that's not necessarily the case. It almost seems random because I've had zombies really close on top of each other and it never triggered. If this mechanic would have been consistent, oh, this would have been great. It doesn't even make the game easier if they would have done this. It actually makes the game harder because now the player is thinking about another extra step in surviving. Instead of taking the easy way out and killing this zombie this far away from me, why not kill it when it gets closer to one of the zombies I already dropped, which could put me at risk? I had to pray to Jehovah just to get this to trigger. And there was actually a point where I sat there in this same hallway over and over again trying to get it to work, and it never did. Then this one time I stacked up a bunch of zombies on this staircase and it still didn't trigger. Thank God it finally happened for me, but ultimately, I think if they would have just made this consistent, I would have loved this new mechanic, and now it just feels like a little bonus that could or could not happen. I wouldn't rely on it in my playthrough. As for the Crimson Heads themselves, honestly, they are like Lisa Trevors to me. They're a cool new mechanic, but they really don't matter if you know how to play Resident Evil 1 very well. Sure, they're fast and they can throw you off guard, but thankfully when you kill a Crimson Head, it's dead forever. You don't have to fight it again. As long as you stick to the hallways you know you will always go through and take out all the zombies there, and even if you don't have fuel, if you have the shotgun, you can actually just blow zombies' heads off easily by letting them get close and shooting them in the face. If you play smart enough, you'll rarely bump into a Crimson Head, and even the few times that I created some, I didn't need to go back in that location again, so it didn't matter they were there. One thing that Resident Evil Remake does better than not just the original Resident Evil, but I'm going to say that this is better than every Resident Evil. This game has some of the best gun sound effects I've heard in a Resident Evil game. These sound effects are so good, and the sound of shooting zombies is so good that I would say that from now on, until Capcom makes better ones, they should just take the audio files from this game and just apply it to every Resident Evil game. Every gun sounds punchy, it sounds loud. It actually adds to the tension because you can hear yourself firing these very powerful guns, but the zombies just keep coming. It actually adds to the feel of the game. Versus the original games had these weaker sounding guns, which kind of made it feel like, well, no crap, these zombies aren't dropping. I'm shooting them with a pea shooter. There are also defensive weapons in this game. Now, the way these work is if you get grabbed, you can actually use a defensive weapon against the zombies, like a grenade or a knife, and it just gets them off of you. Now, the grenade will actually kill them as time goes on once it explodes in their mouth, or you can shoot it and make it blow up. And a cool little detail is that if you happen to stick a zombie in the head with a knife and then blow its head off, you can actually pick the knife back up. This isn't something you should try to rely on, as this is very situational, but it can happen a few times and it's cool to see. These are like a get out of jail free card. Again, they don't add or take away from the gameplay. There's not something you can rely on, but it's kind of like a way to say, hey, if you're low on health and you want to not take damage at all, you could trigger one of these. And when you're fighting the hunters, these could come in handy because there's one thing I got to say about Resident Evil Remake that is pretty bad. And when you fight the hunters, you'll really see how bad it is. RE Remake sticks to the dynamic camera angle system, which I love, and it is beautiful when there are no enemies on the screen. See, the hallways in the remake are actually tighter than the original game, and you don't have that much room, and there's actually a lot of furniture in your way as well. All of that is fine because that adds to the strategy of dodging zombies. Dodging zombies is still as important as it ever was in the remake, and at first I hated this, but Jehovah God showed me the secret sauce of getting around zombies in remake. Instead of doing what I did in the original game, which is kind of stay against a corner or a wall and then just run to the opposite wall, in this game, if you let zombies get close enough, they do this kind of pump fake grab where they don't really grab you like ever. It's like it's very consistent. They won't actually grab you at all. And I think what the developers thought was the player would be so scared they will run into the grab themselves. But if you stay calm, they'll grab you. And when they do this animation, you just run past them. And it works every single time. As long as there's not another zombie that you run into, you'll be perfectly fine. So the hallways were annoying at first because of how tight they were and with all the furniture in my way. It was something I counted as a negative until guys showed me this mechanic, and now I think it's fair. I think it's fine. But what isn't fair, what isn't fine, what isn't good is the dynamic camera angles, because the dynamic camera angles in this game are so poorly made when you have to fight enemies. When you're just maneuvering around the mansion, they are great because nothing can harm you. They look good. But what happens now is the hallways, it's like the vision is cut off. And it's so many hallways, it's so consistent. There's so many hallways where you cannot see the zombies at all. And in this game, you want to see the zombies because ammo is very limited. If you are trying to go for stacking zombies to burn them in one go, which if you're playing bad, you might need to do, you can't really do that. Some enemies like hunters actually have invisibility frames once they take a significant amount of damage. And guess what? You can't rely on audio cues here because sometimes when they get up, they don't make noises. And hunters can actually jump at you, which you cannot see at all. And that's all due to how they cut the camera so short in the remake. So think about it for a second. If you're running low on resources, but you know if you could just simply see what you're doing, you could take out this hunter, the zombie, whatever it is. But because you can't see and you have to step forward for the camera to change, but you could be stepping forward to an enemy that can just easily swat at you in between the camera shift, that's bad. I never had to deal with this in the original Resident Evil 1 or any of the other games after it. So why is it only happening in the remake? And I think it's just because they went for more of a visual improvement and then see how these camera angles would affect the gameplay. The camera is just zoomed in too much so that you cannot see further down the hallway. And some locations that were actually changed around a bit actually suffer the most because you actually can compare it to the original and see how the camera angle was better there than it is now. Is it something that you can get used to? Yes, but it's still bad overall. And I can't tell you how many times a zombie was so up the camera's butt I couldn't even see my own character. This is not good. They added some new locations, the graveyard area, the outside cabin. They rearranged some familiar places, and I felt these places were added to make the place feel more scary, and I think the way they went about it was a bad decision. The remake story isn't really all that different than the original, and in the original, it was kind of understood that just recently there were people living in here doing science experiments. So now when you see this grave with this coffin and you got to put these weird creepy masks on here, it just seemed like generic horror things than, hey, this is something that has to deal with the scientists and then making secret locations to hide items to survive because they realized things were going wrong, which is kind of what they were implying in the first game. A lot of this stuff just seems weird and doesn't make any sense. And when you think about it even further, Lisa had to have been here the entire time. How were the new scientists that were recently here dealing with Lisa roaming around? Was she not roaming around before? They kind of sort of give it an excuse, but it's not believable enough. And ultimately, it doesn't ruin the game, but you could just tell that this is tacked on. As for the new locations, how they look fine. I just think they don't fit here. When it comes to the new puzzles that they added, I think most of the puzzles they added were great. I like how they changed the picture puzzle into matching colors. They removed the puzzle where you need to move the statues and changed it around where now you need to push the statues in places. Now, this is one puzzle where it's not a bad puzzle, but there are these pictures on the wall that give you this implication that some statues need to be out and some need to be further in, but really you're supposed to push them all in. That was a little confusing, but I'm gonna let that slide. I also like the puzzle where you need to match the pieces to open this treasure box. Ultimately, all the puzzles in the game are basically the same, but they do throw you for a loop if you're used to the original one. One of the trickiest ones that thank the Lord I didn't get caught by is actually the one with the plant. In the original, all you need to do is find the chemical and then put it in the water and it'll kill the plant. But in this game, they trick you because there's two ways this can go about. You can actually end up killing the healing items with the poison if you don't direct the water the right way. This is an example of them just taking what you already knew from the original and twisting it on its head just a bit, allowing the new players to get a different experience from the original while also not going so far away from the original that it becomes just a whole new thing. And they do that a lot in this remake. When you go into the side house, that tentacle that comes out the ground, which basically did next to nothing but be annoying in the original, now actually could do significant damage to you, so you need to pay attention to it. This same location actually makes the area with the spiders more important because in the original, outside of a few items that you can get out of here, there was no reason to enter this room. And thank Jehovah God for reminding me to take notes here because at first I thought the pool balls didn't matter, but they're actually the code to the door. Also, they made the bees so annoying in this game. And I like the puzzle around getting the spray to kill them in order to get around them. Like I said, in the original game, the bees are there, but you could ignore them. Here, you need to take care of them unless you want to keep taking damage. And don't forget your knife either. Jehovah God had to remind me the knife was even in this game because unlike Code Veronica, the knife is again useless, but when you have to kill some bees and want to save some ammo, it's a good choice. Jehovah also helped me with the code to the computer in the secret lab. I was sitting there just wondering, like, I'm stacking these pictures on this wall and they're alphabetical order. Like, what am I looking for? But really what you're supposed to do is match the letters of the individual body parts in alphabetical order. Once you figure out this code though, just remember and you'll never have to do it again. I did it with Jill the right way, but as Chris, the code doesn't change, so I just skipped the puzzle altogether. And on a side note, going back to charm and charisma, why did they take out the first person view and the thumbs up and cool animations that Jill and Chris did from the original when you type in Ada and John's code? I thought that was really lame that that's gone and they just stand here like planks of wood. As for boss fights, the boss fights are ultimately the same from the original Resident Evil. The second time you fight the snake boss, it is in a different location, but ultimately it serves the same purpose. The only new boss fight is the fight with Lisa, and it's not really a fight. You really just need to push these blocks down, and Lisa moves so slow that the only thing you need to worry about is her knocking off your partner, but you can let her knock Wesker down. I won't tell anybody. Fighting the tyrant for the first time is somewhat different as they rearranged the room, and it almost got me killed not realizing this, and I thought that was a good little gotcha moment. But ultimately, the room is still a circle, and if you know the direction to go into, you can do the same thing as before, which is unload your revolver in him and he'll die. Now, this might be in the original Resident Evil 1, and I didn't experience it. When you fight him at the end on the helipad, you'll have a partner with you, and you kind of need to save your partner because he's going straight for them. But he can actually swat away the rocket. I don't know if that's in the original or not. I never seen that, but I thought that was cool. It doesn't change much of anything, but I thought it was a unique little strategy because now you have to shoot him when he's not facing you or when he's taking too much damage, then you can hit him. But if you shoot him as soon as you get it, he might just slide it out the way. And what's a Resident Evil game without some bonuses? There are bonus costumes to unlock when you beat the game multiple times, and thankfully you can actually choose the bonus costume in the beginning of the game so you don't have to go through the secret room with the costume key. There's an invisibility mode where you can't see any of the zombies, and that shouldn't be that big of a deal because thanks to these camera angles, you can't see them half the time anyway. There's another mode where Forrest will travel around the mansion with grenades strapped to him, and if you shoot him one time, it just ends the game. But once you get past a certain part in the game, he disappears, so it's only really effective in the first half of Resident Evil. Now, what I think would be challenging, and I'm looking forward to playing one day, is the mode where none of the item boxes are linked. So that means whatever you put in one box is only in that box, and you have to go back to that box to get the items out of it. I always thought that that would have been a cool mechanic in Resident Evil, and now I get to experience it. Overall, Resident Evil 1 Remake is a solid game. I can't deny that. Where I disagree, and I think I might make a whole dedicated video talking about this, is that this just replaces the original. Yeah, it's very much similar to the original, but I don't think that that replaces it because the original still has a level of charm that this version doesn't. And if you're not a fan of the Crimson Heads and the changes made, you can always just play the original game. I would actually like to see Resident Evil 1 get remade again, maybe even twice. One with the modern day remakes of the behind the shoulder camera angle and one that sticks to the dynamic camera angles. Bring back more of the decision making that was in Resident Evil 1 when you talk to different NPCs. That's still in the remake, but just not as many. This game has very scripted moments where zombies can bust through doors, which is cool, but after you play something like Dino Crisis where it's dynamic, I would have liked to see that be implemented in Resident Evil versus the scripted version. With a remake, they could actually make Chris and Jill's campaign feel different outside of difficulty, and they could actually make the stories make sense instead of feeling like separate events that somehow we just bundle together to make sense in the sequels. And it would just be cool to play this entire game with no loading screen between doors. The Resident Evil Remake actually has moments where you can experience this, but it's just only for a moment when the hunters pop up and bust down a couple of doors for you. Resident Evil 1 Remake is only a great game because Resident Evil 1 was a great game. There is nothing added to Resident Evil 1 Remake that I think is so much better than the original that it just trumps it. If I had to compare it to any other remake, I would compare it to Metal Gear Solid 3 Delta, which recently released. That remake took almost everything that Metal Gear Solid 3 had, including some of the extra content that was missing in certain versions, made it with better visuals, and gave it the Metal Gear Solid 5 gameplay mechanics. And because it has a different gameplay mechanic, it actually feels completely different, which Resident Evil 1 Remake sticks so closely to the original's gameplay that it doesn't really make much of a difference, even with the Crimson Heads and Lisa being around. So actually, Metal Gear Solid 3 Remake is actually a better remake than Resident Evil 1 Remake, but I still compared it to because ultimately, Metal Gear Solid 3 is still a great game if you play the original, so you're not really missing much if you just never play the remake. And the same goes for Resident Evil 1 Remake. It's not that big of a difference where you need to play it. You could play the original one and be just fine. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Do you prefer Resident Evil 1 Remake over the original? Do you feel that Resident Evil 1 Remake is still the ultimate remake of all remakes? It is the definition of what a remake should be. I have not found that game yet. I played plenty of games that were remade, and as long as they're just as good as the original, they'll be fine for me, but I just have not played a remake that I could say just makes the original obsolete. But a lot of you feel that way about Resident Evil 1, and I do think I will touch on that in a separate video. But peace out, keep gaming, God bless. Hope you guys are having a great winter. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that hype button. I'm grateful for each and every one of you stopping by. Hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace out, keep gaming, and I'll see you guys in the next video.